Okay, so we're going to continue on with our basic print guidelines for Tinkercad and using our 3D printer. So what we're going to do today is finish out and round out some of our things before we take our quiz. And so what you need to do is download one of your models, which we're going to show you how to import and scale and do some things today. So either your bridge model or your overhang model, doesn't matter which one, but from your dashboard, we're going to click on it. We're going to select download, and we're going to download it as an STL. Now, you might already have your bridge file downloaded onto your Chromebook, which if you do, awesome. You don't need to do this step. But if you don't, you'll need to download either your bridge um, or your overhang model. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our 3D design. We're going to create a new design. And we are going to, when this design opens up, we're going to call this Burke Print Guide. And so this is going to be some more 3D printing guidelines for us that will help us get the most solid prints out of our models. So we're going to go up to the top. We always rename it, our first name, Burke, and we'll call this Print Guide. So we've got our print guide here. I don't like the misspelling, so I'm going to put an extra hyphen in there. So let's do Burke Print Guide. There it is. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to bring in and import our bridge or overhang model. So I'm going to go, and I've already got this downloaded. So what I'm going to do is go to import, and I'm going to choose a file, or if you're on your desktop, you can drag and drop in there. So I'm going to choose a file. And I'm going to go, it's going to look a little different on your Chromebook. You're going to go to Recents and choose a file, and you're going to find your file. So my Burke Bridges, it's going to be saved onto your Chromebook. And so we're going to open this up. And this is going to be the file that I'm going to open up, and I'm going to hit the import. And it's imported my model, my bridge model. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is scale, and a great way to scale a model. So if I take this model and I drag any one of the edges, I've changed the original shape of it because I'm changing it so my measurements aren't going to be exactly the same or to scale. So I don't want to do that. So one of the things that you can do is when you click on a model, if you hold the shift key down, so I'm going to hold the shift key down, and then at the top, if I drag the top one, what I can do is I can make my model bigger or smaller, and it keeps all of the proportions exactly correct. So all of the openings, everything is scaled down, so it's going to be a much smaller model, but it's going to essentially be an exact scale replica of what my full-size model is. So what I want you to do is scale your model down. We're going to put it up in the corner and kind of show what we're going to do with it. But one of the things we talked about when we print is if we were to print it like this and we printed our model, this gap here. Now this gap wouldn't be a problem now because we've scaled it down. But if we had this at the full gap width of 80 millimeters, our bridge would start to droop or have some filament because it doesn't have anything to hang on there. But what we can do is we can orient our prints so that we get the same model. Maybe this is the model that I wanted to make, but I don't want to have the drooping hanging out down here. So what we do is we have to set up our models so that when we go to print them, we are putting as much of our print surface on the bed as possible. So if I scroll around, I'm going to see I can rotate this. And what I want you guys to do with your model is we're going to rotate this 90 degrees. So I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees so that it's going to lay flat. And then what we want to do is make sure that it's flat on the bed. So we're 6 millimeters up. We're going to put it at 0 so it's flat on the bed. Now what we've got here, if I go to look at this model will print perfectly without any of the drooping because I'm just printing it on the bed of the printer. Okay, so that's good. So that would eliminate having to do this. The same thing if you had your overhang model and you have that 90 degrees and all that extra ribbon of filament that's on the bottom of it, if we printed it on its side, we could print a perfect overhang model. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to slide this up and out of the corner, and it's going to be oriented the right way so that we have the least amount of overhangs on our stuff. So that's exactly what we want to do there. So that's going to be our first topic that we're talking about today, which is orientating our builds so that the most material touches the surface. We minimize our bridges, our overhang, so that we've got our stuff is set up nicely for it. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is talk about holes, openings, and making objects that fit together. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a box, and we're just going to set a box in here, and we're going to make this box 10 millimeters tall. So I'm going to make this box 10 millimeters tall, and this box is going to be a 20 by 20, 10 millimeters tall. Okay, and so I'm going to bring in or duplicate this. So I'm just going to Control D, duplicate it, and we're going to drag another box out. And these do not have to be lined up perfectly. We're just going to show, okay, I've got two boxes, 10 by 20, or 10 millimeters tall, 20 by 20. Now we're going to drag a cylinder in here. This is going to be the ones that we've talked about this before, but I'll give you another quick rundown on this. Any shape, you have some basic shapes that have that are grayed out that are the holes for your box or your cylinder, but you could make any solid shape into a hole by changing its properties. So say I've got here a cone, and I drag this cone out here. I change this to a shape or to a hole. Now, when I can group these shapes together, I'm going to get this cone-shaped hole into my model. Okay, so what we're going to do is we can either bring over a cylinder and change it to a hole, or bring the cylinder hole shape over. And what we want to do is we're going to bring this over, and we are going to do this first one. We're going to bring it over here to this, and what we want to do is we're going to make this a 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter hole. So this is going to be a 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter hole. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to put that hole right in the center of this square. So rather than try to make sure that everything is lined up, we're gonna move this close. It was at 20. Let me change my height here back to 20. So there's my height back to 20, which is what it comes in at. So what we're going to do here, oh, I changed that. Let's get here. 10 by 10. There it is. Okay. So what we're going to do first is we're going to grab our shape and we're going to move it close. Doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going to move it close. So it's going to be somewhat in the middle. But I want it to be exactly in the middle for consistency. So I'm going to grab both of these shapes, and I'm going to use the alignment tool. Now remember, when we're looking at the alignment tool, the right one is going to align both to the bottom, to the middle, or both to the top. This is aligned to the right, aligned to the left, aligned to the middle. So this is aligned to the middle, left to right. Then we need to align to the middle, front and back. Okay. So this would be aligned to the back, middle, front. So middle, middle, bottom. This model is lined up perfectly. Now, what I'd like to do, just to be safe, whenever we have the hole, now if I look at this from the bottom, you can see that it's got the hole there. What I like to do if I'm going to make a hole through something is I'll just select the shape here, and I'll just push it down. Oh, I don't want to do that one. I don't want to do the whole shape. I want to do just the cylinder, and this is going to do my movement, and I'm just going to push it down just a little bit so that the hole, see how the hole comes out the bottom? I like to do that just to make sure that I know that there's nothing that's going to be printed there. So then when we group those two shapes together, we're going to group those two shapes together, and we're going to make a nice hole there. Now we're going to zoom in, and one of the things that we're going to look at, and if I hold down shift and my right mouse key, I can pan, so I can slide around. We're going to zoom in here, and one of the things that you're going to notice with my circle is it does not look very circly. So we're going to talk about how do we change that. See how it's not very round? It's got these edges on there. So we're going to fix that with our next one, just so that we've got this to make it so that it's the circle is more circly. We're going to bring our cylinder in again. We're going to make this the same 10 by 10. So we're going to make this a 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter. Okay. And this one we're going to set something up. It's going to be like a holder. So we don't want this model to go all the way through. So we're going to look at a couple of things. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to zoom way in on this so that you guys can see this. And when we look at this, what you're going to see, if I click on this shape and I bring out the box here, I can see the sides. So right now my circle has 20 sides. So if you look at that, that's going to be the edges. So if I go to 12 edges, it gets even less circle-y. So if I move my sides all the way to the farthest to 64, that's going to give me as round of a circle as I possibly can get. So if I look at that, that's going to make a very round circle. I can also adjust the bevel, which if it was going to be a solid, maybe I want to have rounded curved edges so it's not, I don't have that hard edge at the edge of the circle. This being a hole cutout, we don't want to worry about any bevels or edges. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to move this and we're going to center this into the model. And it's really important because I can't see everything. So we're going to start with everything and we're going to zoom out here just a little bit. And we're going to make sure that this is centered. So we're going to do our alignment tool. It's aligned to the bottom, it's aligned to the middle, and then we're going to align it to the middle. So we're aligned to the middle. Now, one of the things that we want to do is this would print all the way through. We don't want this to print all the way through. Remember, this is going to hold something. So I'm going to use my move tool here, and you notice I've got where I want to go. I'm going to go up. Oh, I'm moving the whole model. I don't want to move the whole model. Let's get to just my hole there. Okay. So then I'm getting, so this is where the model is moving up. So what I want to do is, this is 2 millimeters the from the bottom, right? So if I wanted to make a nice, remember our minimum is the 1 millimeter, but I'm going to make this a 2 millimeter gap. So it's going to be 2 millimeters from the bottom. Then I'm going to do my alignment, make sure I'm lined up in the middle again in case I got anything off. I'm not going to change this because that's going to adjust it, but I'm lined up middle, middle, and perfect. So now when I go to group these two together, you will notice that there's a bottom to it. And if I, so that it does not go all the way through. So that'll make a nice, this hole goes all the way through, this hole has it. Now what we're going to do is we need to make something. We're making a toy for a child or something that is going to fit in there. So we want to make sure that our it's a snug fit, but we don't want it to be too good of a fit. So if we made our circle, now our opening is 10 millimeters. So if we made our circle 10 millimeters and we were smart enough to remember that we needed to make it the 64 segments, this, if we were to move over here, when this printed, this would not, even though it looks like it fits perfectly, it would not fit into the hole when we get done. And it's just the tolerances of the printer. It's just not going to do it because there's different, it melts a little bit, the plastic, a little extra plastic, like you need to give some leeway for it. So if it's something that you wanted to make as an axle that needs to spin freely, you would always go 1 millimeter smaller. So we would make this 1 millimeter smaller. So we'll make this 9 and 9. Okay, so this being 1 millimeter smaller will fit loosely in here. It'll be able to spin freely. So that would be if we're going to make an axle or something that needs to move freely. If we want something to be snug, we're going to make a second cylinder. And we'll make a second cylinder here, and we can change the color of it just to show a different color here if you want to. And we're going to make this one the same 64 sides, so it's super circly. And this one, what we want to do is make it 9.5 by 9.5. Okay, and so now we have the two. Now here's the difference between the two of these. This one that is the 9.5 with a 0.5 millimeter is going to be a snug fit. So maybe this is a puzzle and you have to put the right piece into the right hole. So you want to do that, or you're building something, a child's toy. So you would want to go with a 0.5 millimeter tolerance to make it so it's a snug fit. If you want it to be something that is loose and able to spin freely, you would go with the axle. So if I move this over here, this is going to be spin freely, so I can put it right next to this model. This is going to fit in and be nice and tight. So this is going to be our 9.5. So this is going to be a nice tight fit. Okay, so there's going to be our models for talking about openings and inserting objects into those openings. So we've got our orientation and inserting objects into our openings. Two topics left. The next one is going to talk about engraving and embossing, and just making sure that's going to be our text, and making sure that our text is set up and is exactly what we want it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drag in and we're just going to make a little nameplate. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this just 3 millimeters tall, and we're going to make this, let's make this 50 millimeters long. Well, let's make it 60. Let's make it 70 millimeters long, just so that we've got it. And so what we're going to do now is this is going to be our nameplate, or what we're going to do our text on. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at here, how do we put text on here. So we're going to drop our work plane on top, and we're going to bring a text box in. So under our basic shapes, if we go in, we can find text and numbers. And if you're going to use text a lot, what I recommend is you hit the star to turn it into a favorite. And what that's going to do is it's going to add those things to your favorites. And I'm going to show you some other things added to your favorites here in just a second. So we're going to add our text, and I'm going to bring my text in here. And then what I'm going to do first is we're going to talk about embossing. Embossing is the raised text. So it's going to add material to create the text. So I'm going to click on the text, and if I want to, I can get rid of this work plane because I know that my text is on there. And so I'm going to click on my text box, and I am going to type the word emboss. Okay, so this is going to be emboss. And what we want to do is we can change the font of it if we want to. And what we're going to do is there's my emboss. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to hit the shift key because I'm scaling it. And I'm going to scale it down so that it fits onto my model here. So I'm going to scale this down some more. There it is. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, if we look at this, what we want to do is, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so that you guys can see this. Okay. So what we want to do is look at and see kind of how big is our text. So this tells us how long it is, but it's hard for us to actually see how big the text itself is. So what we want to do is, if we bring in a block, or a block of something that'll give us a reference. So I'm just going to bring a block in here, and I'm going to make this, I want my letters to be about 1 millimeter in width. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this 1 millimeter in width, and I'm going to bring this in and just kind of put it lined up kind of with the M, right? And so then when I scroll in and I zoom in here, what I can do is I can look at this, and as I move my text, I can see where, let me click off of this here. Let's get off of my model here. There it is. So I'm going to zoom into this, and what I can do is if I click on my text model, I can move this over a little bit, and I can see just by looking at it that my M, that edge of the M is just about 1 millimeter. So that's pretty good. That's about a millimeter in text. So that's pretty good. So what we're going to do is, this is going to be our embossing. And what we want to do is we're going to clean this up a little bit. We're going to move this into the middle. So what I'm going to do is do our alignment. I'm going to align this. So I want my embossing to be right smack in the middle and right smack in the middle, right? So that's going to be right in the middle of it. And what we're going to do now is click off of it. And what we want to do is when we're doing our letters, if I look at this, the letters are actually sitting up pretty tall. We don't want the letters to be that tall. So those letters are going to be 3 millimeters tall. When we're going to be making text, 0.5 millimeter is more than enough for our text to show up. We don't need anything more than 0.5 millimeter sticking out of our text to show what it's going to be. So this would print nicely. Good 0.5 millimeter is it's not going to get messed up. It's going to be pretty solid with what we've got for our model. and we can make it so that this is the text is going to look really nice. Okay, so there's embossing. Embossing is the raised letters. So now what we're going to do, just to make this interesting, is we're going to grab both of these and we're going to control D to duplicate it because we've got it in the middle. So we're going to do control D to duplicate it, and we're going to slide one down a little bit. Okay, this one our first one that's our embossing, we're going to group those together so it's ready for a 3D print. So we're going to group those together. That becomes one solid print embossing, and we're going to slide that up out of the way. So embossing is raising the text. Now I'm going to talk about engraving. Engraving is when you actually remove materials, so the text is going to appear embedded into it. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to click on the text. Oh, let's get off of this here. Click on the text, open up our shape, open up our text here, and we're going to change this to say engrave. Okay, so this is going to be engrave. Now we've got it engraved, and now what we're going to do here is we are going to make sure that this is lined up in the middle again. So I'm going to do my alignment because my words are a little bit different. It's middle, middle, perfect. There it is, just in case I got off. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click on the engrave, click on the engrave, and we're going to change it to, oh, not that one. I want my, oh, hold on here. Click on the engrave, change that to a hole. And then what we're going to do is that's going to be our hole. We are going to look at our height here. So now our height is 3 millimeters off. What we want to do is it's at the top. So at 3 millimeters, that's the top of our model. What we are wanting to do, if we're going to click that, we want to embed it in just a little bit. So you have to know what the height of your model is. We're going to do 2.5. So just like before, what we're going to do is it's going to be engraved in 1/2 millimeter. So now what we're going to do is group these two shapes together. And we now have our text. So this is going to be our text that's going to be embossed, is going to be raised letterings, 1/2 millimeter should be fine for us, and engraved, again, 1/2 millimeter. It's going to give us that nice engraved lettering for. So you're going to have everything there. The embossed, remember, is sticking out. The engraved is cut into the model. The last thing we're going to talk about is durability and strength of your model. And so if we take this, what we're going to do is grab a box. We're going to flatten this down. So we're going to make this, we'll make this a nice flat 3 millimeters. And we're going to make this, we'll make this 30 by 30. 30 by 30. Okay, so this is going to be our model here. And now what we've got, this is our plate. And so we're making a bookend. So now what we're going to do is with our bookend, we're going to duplicate this shape. Control D to duplicate it. And then we're going to rotate this on its end because it's going to make just a square bookmark. So we're going to make this a 90-degree. So there's our bookmark. Now it just rotates it directly on its middle. So it's right there in the middle, which we don't want. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise this up a little bit. And then once we get this raised up, we can do our alignment here. And what we want to do is we're going to make this to be a 1 millimeter in width for this top one. So I'm going to show you something here. So we're going to make this 1 millimeter. All right, and so we have got this bookmark that we've got here that is going to be raised up. So this one is, what is the height here? So this one is 3 millimeters tall. This one is at 4, so I got to bring this down just a little bit so it's touching. So remember, it's 3 millimeters, so now it's going to be touching at the top of it. So now I've got it touching at the top of it. Now here's the problem with this. If I print this off just as it is, it's not going to print very nicely because, well, it'll print nicely, but it's not going to be very sturdy, and I could actually snap that. So a heavy book would not work with this because I've got very little space down here for that's connected to the base. So a couple of ways you can do it. One, I can make this much thicker. So I could make this thicker. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is use what's called a fillet. And so if you go into your basic shapes and you go into your shape generator all, on about page 12, you'll see the fillets. So if I scroll all the way down, I see everything here for the shape generators. Let's go to shape generators all. There it is. And so now I'm in the shape generators. What you want to do is go to about page 12. It's gonna be right in there. That's where I found it. The meta fillet. Make it a favorite so you can use this. And what I'm going to do now is if I go back to my favorites, here's my favorite. So I'm going to bring my meta fillet in here. I'm going to rotate it up on its end. So I've got it here. So it's at the 90 degrees. So we're going to put my fillet at 90 degrees. And then what I can do here is I'm going to rotate this also 90 degrees. So it's going the right direction. And what you can do is if you see this, the fillet is gives it a curved, reinforced, more material. So instead of just having a 90-degree edge with a little bit of space here, we've got this curve that provides extra material. So I hold down my shift key, scale this down just a little bit so I get it. I don't want it to be a super huge fillet. I'm going to bring it over into my model so it's in the right spot. I need to make it a little bit bigger. Let's make my fillet a little bit bigger, bring it into the model here so it's there. Again, I got to make this a little bit bigger so that it shows up here, right? And so what I'm going to do is align both of these up. So I'm going to line this up. So these are going to be aligned up bottom to bottom. And we're going to line this up left corner to, oh, I'm sorry, left corner to left corner. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to line these up bottom to bottom. So these are going to be lined up bottom to bottom. Now what we're going to do is click off of this. I want to get this back up on my base. So we're going to pull my fillet back up onto the base. So we get this whole model here. Raise this up. It's at -6. Put it back on my floor, which is 0. There we go. So now what I can do is I can scale this fillet down a little bit so I get the right, oh, I don't want to do the height of it. I'm going to scale it down. Let's see, a shift and scaling it down. Move the fillet over so that I've got it here. There it is. So there's my fillet. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is drag this across to make it so it's so it gets the full length. So it's the 30. And then when I am ready, what I can do is group this together. Now, if I wanted to, I could put a second one on the back end, but I'm going to group this together. And instead of having just a flat corner here, I've got increased material support. So that's going to be the use of fillets. And that is going to be your final model. So this is what you should turn in. You're going to export this as an STL and turn it in. Orientation, an axle through an opening, model that will fit inside another model that's 0.5 millimeter difference, embossing, engraving, and fillets. And that is everything that you need for basic printing to get us moving forward.